Originally I was going to title this something different, but then I thought the most disastrous trade in NFL history, and it really does fit the trade. And after I talk about it, I think a lot of you are going to agree with me. What's going on, guys? And today I'm not talking about a Herschel Walker type trade, where one team won big and another, well, didn't. I'm talking about a trade that was so bad, no one involved got anything of value, and the after effects, they were rough. Now, for those of you that are betting folks, or watching this with a friend, place your bets now. I'll give you a few seconds. Okay, time's up. Any of you that guessed the Colts trading a first-round pick for Trent Richardson, you'd be correct. Now, before I go on as to the after effects of this trade, let me give some background as to why Trent Richardson was so highly coveted and why the Colts felt they had to get him for a first-round pick. Now, for those of you that watched college football in 2011, I mean, Trent Richardson was basically unstoppable for Alabama. Basically, he was just amazing that season. And Alabama was the premier team, so the best player on that team, it's no wonder why he was such a highly touted prospect. And when I mean highly touted, in a draft that had RG3 and Andrew Luck, people had him as the top player in the entire draft. And I'm not just talking one or two people. There were a lot of analysts that had him as the best player in the draft. And at the end of the day, none of us thought that it was weird that the Browns had traded up one spot with the Vikings up to number 3 to get him, especially after they had lost out on RG3 and what they would have had to give up to get to number 2. This just seemed like a very, very good consolation prize. And at the time, the AFC North, I mean, was dominated by the Steelers and the Ravens, two teams that were just known for running the ball extremely well. And the Browns, in order to compete in that division, they felt that they had to get the running game going. And with Richardson, we all thought it was going to be as easy as that. And in his rookie season, I mean, he did fine. He rushed for just under 1,000 yards. He had 12 total touchdowns. I mean, the yards per carry were only 3.6, but at the time, everyone thought he's just going to get better his second year, and the Browns are going to have a very good player for at least the next half-decade, maybe even longer. And then, only after 2 games in the 2013 season, the Colts trade a first-round pick for him. Now, the Colts had the first overall pick in 2012, so they got Andrew Luck. And with Luck, they went from one of the worst teams in the NFL, or not one of the worst team in the NFL, to a wildcard team that lost to the Ravens in the first round of the playoffs. Andrew Luck, one of the best rookie quarterback seasons of all time. He was only going to get better with age, and the Colts felt they were going to have a window right now, and they felt like they had to get players to help them get over the hump as quickly as they could. And they felt getting a first-round pick for Trent Richardson, or trading a first-round pick for Trent Richardson, my bad, was the one way how they were going to accomplish that. And at the time of the trade, people were questioning why the Browns were even doing this, because they just drafted Trent Richardson 3rd overall in the last draft. So why would they trade away somebody that they spent a high draft pick on for a first-round pick that probably wasn't going to be in the top 20? And as it turned out, it wasn't. Why would they do this for a guy that we all thought was going to be a cornerstone for them for a while? And then we saw the after effect. At the end of the day, at the time the trade was made, none of us batted a second eye, and we all thought the Colts had just stolen this great player from the Cleveland Browns. But it was anything but. Turns out Richardson was fool's gold. In his season and almost second with the Indianapolis Colts, so in almost 2 years, he rushed for under 1,000 yards. I think he rushed for less than he rushed for in his rookie season, and he only had 8 total touchdowns. In almost 2 seasons with the Colts, he had 8 total touchdowns. He had 12 his rookie year with the Browns, and his yards per carry, it was 3.1. And this is the worst part of it. He never had a 100-yard game. Oh, by the way, in the lone playoff game that he played for in Indianapolis, he had 4 carries, 1 rushing yard, 1 fumble. Yeah, that was not good. But it goes beyond that. It really does. Because that first round pick turned out to be 26 overall in the 2014 draft. Now, Indianapolis could have done a lot of things with that pick. They could have traded up and gotten Zach Martin. And gotten Quentin Nelson before Quentin Nelson. They could have gotten Quentin Nelson 4 years earlier. Or they could have stayed put and get Joe Paterno. Hopefully I said that right. Again, another great guard. Couldn't even trade it up and gotten Jawan James. Hey, he would have done a lot more for them than Trent Richardson would have done. Okay? That's all I'm going to say. Maybe even trade up and get another weapon in Brandon Cooks. Or get some other players that could have helped out the team. But instead, they trade for Trent Richardson, who was gone after the 2014 season. And again, 3.1 yards a carry, no 100-yard games, and 8 total touchdowns as a Colt. And Trent Richardson never played an NFL game after the 2014 season. Okay, so turns out the Browns knew what they were doing. They saw Trent Richardson and they didn't think he was going to be the player that they drafted 3rd overall. So they dumped him for a first-round pick. Great for them. They got a first-round pick. Now, if they can use that pick wisely, maybe... Oh, wait. That's right. They took Johnny Manziel. And here's the other thing about that. They did not take Johnny Manziel 26 overall. They took him 22nd. They traded up with Philadelphia so that they could get him. By the way, Philadelphia used the 26 overall pick on Marcus Smith. He was cut after 3 years in Philadelphia. And they also traded a 3rd round pick, which Philadelphia traded to Houston so Houston could trade up and get Lewis Nix. In return, they got 2 other picks that turned out to be Jalen Watkins and Taylor Hart. Okay, so all those players involved did not have great NFL careers. And rest in peace to Lewis Nix. So pretty much every single player involved in this trade and every single team, like I had mentioned, got no value whatsoever out of anything. But back to Johnny Manziel. Manziel, we all knew what he was at Texas A&M. He was one of the most exciting players in college football. He won the Heisman Trophy as a redshirt freshman, the first ever player to do that. That had never been done before, and Johnny Manziel did it. He came out the following year, and at the time he was kind of seen as a polarizing prospect. You thought, if you can develop him, you have an exciting NFL player, but at the same time he was seen as a little bit of a party animal and how seriously would have taken the game. They had to get him in an environment where they could develop him right and keep him on the up and up. But instead he goes to Cleveland. And the worst part is, the ownership had completely ignored the committee that they hired to do evaluation on the quarterbacks. They said that they should have gotten Teddy Bridgewater. He was still there, but they took Manziel instead. Why would you even do a committee like that if you're just going to ignore them in the first place? Well, Manziel played in 14 games. He had 8 starts. He went 2-6 as a starter. Now, I know wins are not a quarterback stat, but these are quarterback stats. He completed 57% of his passes for 1,675 yards, 7 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, with a passer rating of 74.4. That's bad. That is extremely bad. In 2 seasons in the NFL, again, he started 8 games. He couldn't even throw more touchdowns than he had starts. And he threw just as many interceptions as touchdowns. That is not good. And again, he was seen as a party animal at Texas A&M, and that's what got him in trouble at Cleveland. He lasted 2 seasons in Cleveland, never played in the NFL again. He played in the Canadian Football League, in the AAF, and then retired. He was also in the Fan-Controlled Football League. But, again, this trade was a disaster for both Cleveland in Indianapolis. For Cleveland, this was right in the middle of when they just could not get a first-round pick right at all. After they took Joe Hayden with their first-round pick in 2010, it took them until 2017 with Myles Garrett before they finally got their first-round pick right. And they had a lot of first-round picks during that time period because they would have multiple first-round picks throughout the year. And the Johnny Manziel pick is really what exemplifies this. The fact that they kept trying to take these players that they did not realize what they needed in order to succeed in the NFL. And as for the Colts, do you know why I was mentioning offensive linemen when I was talking about the players that the Colts could have gotten with that first-round pick? It's because during Andrew Luck's time as a starter, the offensive line was the biggest issue. If they had gotten one of those guys, yes, even Jawan James, it could have helped out Andrew Luck and he wouldn't have gotten beat up as much as he did, wouldn't have had those injuries, and wouldn't have had to retire early. I mean, who knows? He could still be in the NFL today had the Colts been able to help the offensive line earlier. And again, the Colts didn't get to the Super Bowl with Andrew Luck. They got to the championship game, but they didn't get to the Super Bowl, and they had the talent to do it, they just couldn't get over the hump. And it wasn't Trent Richardson that was going to get them there. So really, this trade was just bad for all parties. Yes, even the Texans and the Eagles, who later became a part of this trade, during the draft weekend, nobody got any value, and it just did not turn out the way anyone had hoped it would. Trent Richardson, he was gone after the 2014 season. Johnny Manziel, he was cut after 2 seasons, and he never played in the NFL again, never got a second chance. For the Colts, their franchise quarterback retired after the 2018 season. And for the Cleveland Browns, again, it was right in the middle of just their disaster of a decade that was the 2010s. I mean, keep in mind, 2014, that was 2 years before their 1-31 in between 2 seasons. 2016, 2017, they went 1-31 between those 2 seasons. And that trade for Trent Richardson for a first-round pick, it was just not good on both sides. I don't know if this is the worst trade in NFL history. I really don't. But it's probably the worst lose-lose trade in my lifetime of watching the NFL. It just didn't work out for any of these teams. And sometimes that's just how trades are going to go. There's not always going to be a winner and a loser. There's going to be trades that we have a winner and a winner, like I talked about with Matthew Stafford for Jared Goff, and then we're going to have a loser and a loser, like this trade. But to have a trade with this much ramification after the fact, it was just bad. And again, I don't know if there's been a worse trade in my lifetime of watching the NFL.